it was interesting yesterday listening through the different pitches and realizing that knowingly or unknowingly for some, they were already venturing into gender equality and social inclusion in one way or another. And I just wanted to acknowledge those efforts, but also highlight and re-emphasize that there could still be areas where we still need to grow. But yeah, so some of the challenges that innovations are addressing issues such as the lack of access to data for decision making, challenges with resource access, and as a result, they were working on tech and innovative solutions. I think there was a project that also referred to water resource conflicts, and a project that spoke about underrepresentation of women and youth in decision making and livelihoods being negatively affected by the impact of climate change. And if you don't see your challenge here, please don't take offense. There was so much that I could compress in a few slides. And then it was also interesting to hear that we were talking about exactly who is facing or being affected by these challenges. And we were referring to traditional farmers, local fish farmers, small-scale farmers, communities, beneficiaries. We refer to the people and the communities that we are working with differently. And for me, sitting down and not being an innovator or an entrepreneur, I had questions to say, so who is this farmer? And that's why we'll ask for your help later on. And then, some of the innovations that were being shared, and thanks to Rebecca and team, they've already captured some of them. I'm sure I didn't capture them adequately there. But we heard of apps for data management, use of AI, tech adoption, bacteriophages. By the way, yesterday felt like I was being taken back to where my career started. So I didn't start off in gender equality and social inclusion. I can see some of those looks. I started off from a technical science background. Now I refer to myself as perhaps a social environmentalist. So if you put me in a lab now, I get lost. So when you were talking about all those bacteriophages, oxidation tanks, and then I was starting to get traumatized. How did we used to calculate that? And I was remembering my undergrad grades and all those things. But again, I'm sharing this so that you don't sit here and you feel, but I'm in biotech. Why should I think about gender equality, or why should social inclusion matter to me? And really, I think especially for this year, we are living in an era where we all need to be GESI people, as Ed likes to put it. So, and I'm sure using these slides, you are all seeing that in one way or the other, you are GESI people. We just need to strengthen and improve on some of what we are already doing. So yeah, so these were some of the technologies or the innovations that were shared. And then to what end? So people are hoping that their innovations will contribute to empowerment, improving livelihoods. I think some talked about rewarding communities, changing attitudes and mindsets, shift, transformation, change, awareness raising. And I remember there was a slide that ended with the tagline, farming with peace of mind. And if we are really going to achieve that, it needs us to address some of the inequalities and some of the discriminations and the marginalizations that we see in the communities for whom we are developing some of these innovations. Again, I always say it's a question. Do we develop our innovations and technologies for communities, or ideally we should develop with communities? So for and with there is a slight difference there, but it may mean a lot. And some of the learnings along the way, I think we ended the day yesterday with 2 people who have journeyed the road ahead of us, sharing some of their experiences. And these are some of them. I think the first one was actually from a presentation earlier, who shared that based on their learnings, they had to shift from text messaging to voice messaging because farmers were having challenges with typing, but it was easier for them to record. And then we also spoke about tailor-made solutions. Rebecca's presentation ended on this note, listening to the farmers. And I also captured this, listening and adapting to their needs. I think Kitia shared how farmers were telling their team that, okay, these are the percentages that you've calculated, but we want to use these proportions instead. And they adjusted based on what the communities were telling them. Win-win, win them over. Fabian spoke a lot about the relationships as well, connecting with each other. And then as we ended, I think there was reference to try and be farmer or customer grounded as much as possible, because it's the farmers who ultimately determine the success of your innovation. Will they adopt? Yes or no? Usually, tech adoption, we think it's a linear process. There is a problem, we come with a solution, and then it will solve the problem. It will be adopted, and it will be used. But in reality, we discover that that line is going in all directions, in all shapes, isn't? So yeah, so user-centered, fit for purpose, it enhances the contributions of our innovations. And then almost all the presentations yesterday shared how they are contributing to the different SDGs. And you know your project best, you know where you are, which SDGs you are contributing to. We'll come back to this slide later. So this is what I picked from yesterday. And then now, this is my fun part. I did say that yesterday there was so much talk about farmers, small-scale farmers, fish farmers, and all those things. And I'm just asking you this small ask. On a piece of paper, please write the characteristics of the type of farmers you are targeting for your innovation. And feel free to describe them in any way, based on their height, based on their gender, based on their race, based on their income, whichever way. And if you are artistically gifted, please feel free to draw. So you can draw or simply list. And I will give us 2 minutes for that. So please help me. You see, I'm not from this region, but I work in this region. And at times I've realized that my understanding of who is a farmer may be different from what I know. So just think of this as helping me understand your working context, and then we'll get to the next part of the presentation. And if you were not pitching yesterday, just use your mind to think from what you heard. What do you think? Who is the farmer that you think the presentations were referring to? Is that clear? So everyone in the room, ideally, you can share something. Okay, thank you very much. I think this should do. Let's see what we can quickly get from this. So farmers, women farmers who grow multiple aquatic species in their 1 hectare ponds. So we're seeing land coming up there. They are part of an aquaculture cooperative. So we see gender as well. Small-scale farmers, gender-balanced farm operation. I wonder what that means. Now I'm thinking I should have asked people to put their names, because I was going to ask this person to explain what they mean by this. But it's okay. Yes. So they are working at first phase with experienced level, intermediate and advanced skills. Farmers who have been in shrimp farm business for 5 to 10 years. They belong to an association, and they have a mindset that makes them willing to try anything that would work. So they are open-minded. And then the drawings there, from my first grade class, this is how we used to draw boys and men. So I take it this person is saying they work mostly with male farmers. Yes, they work with husband and wife, so with a household unit. They have local group between 20 to 50 years at village level. I will not be able to go through all of them, so if I leave out any, it's nothing personal. Youth and women groups, more advanced in shrimp cultivation, limited access to be involved in shrimp activities, especially for women. This one says they work with retired housewives in their homes or community centers. Children can help. Age group is flexible, education not required. Whoever drew this one, thank you very much. Women farmers, they have a phone. They live in the rural areas. So they do more phone calls and messages, and they seem to love it. These are Mekong farmers. Okay, so we will pause here. And as you can see, there is no clear-cut line. Some are working more with men, some are working more with women, some are working with a household unit. And the reason why we did this exercise is because many a times when you start talking about gender, people automatically think you are talking about women. People automatically think, I've been in some sessions where I'm asked, are you trying to turn us into feminists, right? But beyond feminists, shouldn't we all be disturbed and be moved by the inequalities and any form of discrimination and exclusion that may be existing in our societies? And isn't that what then we hope our innovations will address? And on that note, we will just do a quick run through some of the basic concepts. What do we mean when we talk about gender? I've learned not to assume that gender has been around for a long time so people understand what it means. Otherwise, we will have the innovators and entrepreneurs in this room walking out and just going to select women and think, okay, we add them to our program and we will achieve our outcomes. But it does not work like that. So my objectives for this session are simple: to share and spark interest in gender equality and social inclusion, and stimulate and enhance GESI actions in aquaculture innovations, and hopefully identify where to start, opportunities for businesses. I think from what we've shared so far, you can all see possible entry points to your work. So what is gender? So as you can see there, it's the socially constructed roles, behaviors, attributes, and relations. And relations is underlined there because that is very key in gender. Many a times, again, people have the wrong impression that when we talk about gender, we are trying to antagonize men and women. But as someone shared, they work with a husband and a wife. That's a relationship. And how do we maximize on that relationship so that it gives equitable benefits and distribution to both the man and the woman in the household. It's dynamic, it's changeable, it's context specific as well. So that's why, again, I asked you to draw a farmer. I told you where I come from, perhaps a farmer could be different from what you know because the contexts are different. And as well, change is possible, especially with climate change. We see changes in roles, in responsibilities. For instance, in communities where we see migration of the husbands or the fathers, and then the wives and the mothers stay behind for reasons, and they have to assume some of the responsibilities and the roles that have been traditionally been undertaken by men. And gender identities are not binary, but they are on a spectrum or continuum. So I know most of the definitions that are still out there on gender, they still highlight the binary, men, women, boys, and girls. But we know in our societies we have people who may not identify as either of those two, and we need to be inclusive. And it's intersectional. Again, most of what we've highlighted here, it shows us that it's not simply being a man and a woman that determines or shapes your power, your access to resources, the level of marginalization. There's other factors that come into play. People have talked about whether the farmers are based in the rural areas or near cities, the level of education, whether someone is in a marriage or not, their level of income, their age, and so forth. And just to be clear, gender is not male and female. Those are biological features, and we can describe them based on our body and things like that. And it's not a synonym for women. I will keep saying this because people think, oh, you are talking about women only. And then we want to talk about inequality and the drivers. I've also mentioned some of them. It's issues such as the unequal power relations and underlying structures. And these cut across scale from within the household, going right up to international levels. We are working on nature-based solutions and climate change here. And at global level, at times you have to think about who is actually sitting at the table. And at times we see the patriarchy at global stage coming out in full force. There is no space for women to be part of the decision-making processes and different socially marginalized groups. And so there's also issues of legitimization of hierarchies and oppressions. It's naturalized, so people end up being comfortable with certain ways of doing things, even where they are wrong. You know, it's natural. I will give an example. Not in Southeast Asia, but I was in Bangladesh a few weeks ago, and child marriages, although not allowed by law, but within the communities that we were meeting, we discovered that almost all the parents that we had, their children had been married off as children because they themselves had been married off at 14, at 13, at 15. So it seems like it's the norm, but it's not. And then, so we also talk about human rights, fairness, and justice. And part of what we aim to do should also contribute to those issues. And then the social part, it may be an individual or a collective, a group. We've been talking about socially marginalized groups. This could be indigenous peoples, it could be ethnic minorities, young people, people with disabilities, and any other key social group really. And they have their associated roles, behaviors, attributes, and we see relations again. relations are important because they drive the community. If they are not good, the community will not be healthy, there'll be conflict. That's where we see a lot of the inequalities coming in. And then societies are also dynamic and context specific, and I've highlighted some of those variables. And inequality relates to universal human rights and our failure to uphold this. And inequity, it's fairness and justice, and we're talking about whether it's distributional, recognitional, procedural. We will not go into all that, but we can have a conversation during the World Cafe. And then it's also about what and between whom. So the relations, what are you relating about, or what are the issues that need to be addressed, and between whom, because we're talking about an unlevel playing field. So just to try and make some of the words that I've been using so far make sense, and I still haven't found the best image that speaks to aquaculture. So please don't come for me and tell me that, but we don't see shrimp there. We are seeing fish, so this is fisheries. If you know an image that is better than this and more relevant to aquaculture, please share it with me. Yeah, so you will see in this picture, usually people look at this and they think this is equality because everyone has been given the same platform to stand on. So people think, oh, yeah, so that is equality and we are doing it. People think if we give everyone the same kind of innovation, the same kind of intervention, it's going to address the challenges that they face. But in reality, you'll realize that that kind of equation does not work. So what is equality? And what is equity? So it's being responsive to the specific needs of the different people or social groups that you are working with. So there is no one size fits all, right? As you will see here, again, this is not a child. I was told, no, we don't work with children. This is not a child. This is a young person, or perhaps someone who is vertically challenged, if we can take it as that, but it's not a child. And the resources are all there. And the assumption is everyone has been given a fishing line and they can access the resources. But this one is still struggling with untying their fishing rod and setting up. And someone is already there, they've caught several fish already. And this can be the scenario even in the communities that we are saving. And our goal or our aim should be then to have everyone getting equitable access, whether it's to the resources or it's to our technologies or it's to the opportunities that are there. So I hope you can already start thinking, okay, if it's a technology that requires financial investment, who is the farmer then that you are targeting for that kind of technology? It will obviously not be everyone, but perhaps in that instance, there are some who naturally get graded out, even without our intervention. Can their financial means afford the technology that we are promoting, for instance? And that doesn't mean our technology should die or be discarded. But it gets us to think, okay, so if we are trying to reach out to everyone equitably, maybe to one farmer with the means, they are required to purchase the innovation at full cost. But to another farmer, maybe we need government subsidized support to also help them. So these are different scenarios which we can only be able to be aware of when we think of how do we deliver and how do we provide for the different social groups in our midst. Yes. So just to summarize, gender equality then, it refers to equal rights, responsibilities and opportunities for women and girls, boys and girls, and I've added there, and diverse gender identities. And it does not mean that women and men will become the same. Many a times people have that fear and they're already running away from talking gender equality because they think we are coming to make women the same as men. That's not the idea. But really, we are talking about the rights, the responsibilities, and opportunities that will not be shaped by whether someone is born a female or they are born a male. So ideally, if I'm going to access an innovation, for instance, if I'm going to be part of aquaculture, it shouldn't be determined by the fact that, oh, she's female, she cannot do this, or she cannot be a part of that. So I'm being conscious of time, and we can discuss more in the World Cafes in the afternoon. And then social inclusion, it's the process of improving the terms on which individuals and groups participate in society, improving their ability, the opportunities, and the dignity, especially of those disadvantaged. And the disadvantage can come from different backgrounds, including colonial legacies in some of the countries that we work in. And then we've already touched on some of those disadvantages. And a classic example from yesterday, I think it was when DoFarm shared their technology. And suddenly people were asking, so who is your target for this technology? And there was talk about, but traditionally, aquaculture farmers are older. But technologies, apps are adopted more by younger farmers. And there was that discussion already. I'm highlighting this to show you guys that we were already having that lens, that thinking, and for most of us, perhaps unknowingly, but we were already dabbling into that. So social GESI is a whole of society approach, leaving no one behind, and recognizing the key roles and unique needs. So we spoke a lot about the needs yesterday. What are the challenges? What are the needs? And in the bigger picture, the disproportionate impacts of climate change. So different people are affected differently by climate change, and some will face the impacts more severely than others, depending on what they have. And then it's not enough to just talk about people as being men and women. And even within this room, if we ask all those who identify as women to stand up, we are very diverse. We would have different social markers or identities that make us different. And so an intersectional gender lens, it allows us to also be aware of the multiplicity of aspects, and gender is the main axis. So that's the example there. It could be issues of language, could be marital status, it could be race, culture, disability, or your income status. And some of it we have already shared in these papers that we have done. So what our descriptions of the different farmers, for most of us, we didn't describe the farmers based on their gender only. But it was other markers which then shape the marginalization and the power and the discrimination that one would experience. So intersectionality helps us to understand issues in more detail, and it helps us again to refine our approaches. And we talked about being fit for purpose, and that can help us. Okay, So why GESI in aquaculture innovations? Why have I been talking to you guys about all this? Just a quick run through. I did say we'll come back to the slide. So yesterday, some of the pitches, they did not see their work connecting to gender equality, which is SDG 5, and reduced inequalities, which is SDG 10. And I'm just asking you to think back on your pitch and your innovation and try and ask yourself, how is my work contributing? Or where is it falling short, if not? And then just at a glance, what are some of the issues? Generally, women contribute a significant proportion of the labor force within the aquaculture sector, and they face a lot of barriers compared to men, and this is as a result of their multiple and competing roles at different scales. So in the home, in the household, in the community as well. So perhaps before she can even go and market and access the market, she has to cook at home, she has to care for a sick relative, and then by the time she gets to the market, perhaps the cheaper free shrimp has been sold and she cannot afford whatever is remaining at that time. So those are some of the things that we need to have in mind. And women's contribution is generally under-remunerated or unrecognized and undocumented. So we still have serious gender data gaps within the sector, and some of your work here can also contribute to plugging those gaps. I know some of us yesterday, we talked about how we are creating jobs in the sector and all that. But as Christine said, we hope that this is not just being tokenistic. When we are talking about creating jobs, we go a step further to say within those jobs, are we having equal working conditions, or are we catering to the needs of the woman in the workplace and all that? And then unequal gender norms and imbalances in power dynamics, which continue to reinforce the unequal status. And nature-based solutions therefore risk deepening existing inequalities if they don't consider GESI principles. And therefore, we may find ourselves causing harm in some of the communities that we work with. For instance, increased gender-based violence. Thank you. So I just want to wrap up the business case for GESI. This is a quote that I found from one of the documents. And I just want to highlight that we should not see this as a box-ticking exercise. So it's not about us meeting certain standards, or I'm applying for funding from ADB Ventures and this is what they want, and I will simply show them on paper. We need to do more than that. And then quickly, so what's the business case for GESI? Innovations in aquaculture production, technologies, and value chains need to transform the sector. I took this from the white paper that NACA and FAO did, and understand your gender biases. So as a team, you get to understand and be aware of your blind spots. And then you get to know and be aware of unequal access. You promote agency and voice. I think some of the examples that we've shared, they point to that. And then providing innovations that will close gender gaps and meet the needs of women and socially marginalized groups. And then we go back to delivering innovations that are user-centered and fit for purpose, and that contribute to enhanced adoption, use, and scalability. And then that will contribute to our profits. And yeah, so our World Cafe session will focus on this: how do we get started internally, and how do we contribute to leveling the playing field externally? And this is what the World Cafe session will work on. And we will also build on this, don't worry. We will have our pictures for our World Cafe session. So yeah, thank you very much for this moment. I hope it's been helpful to you.